Hello and welcome back. This video is part of the Health 360 series, meant as a demo for the Wellbeing, Wellness, and Habits dashboards. Before diving into the specifics, let me cover a few things on dashboard structure, since most of the dashboards in the Health 360 series templates implement two main sections. For this, I'm going to go to the Habits dashboards, since out of the three covered in this video, it has the structure that is most similar to the rest of the dashboards implemented in the series. Let's talk about those two sections that I mentioned. The first one, and pretty much is the same across all dashboards, is the Dates section on the left-hand side panel. This section displays your start and end date from your journal, as well as a report date for the dashboard. The report date will be either the date you have specified on the highlight date field in your journal, or if you have deleted that and left it blank, it will display today's date by default. If you did not modify the highlight date, both the report date and the highlight date in your journal will display today's date, and they will be both in sync and updated, which is why I recommend you don't change the highlight date field. Now, below your dates, you will find, still part of this first section, a table with the week breakdown of your dates. This table shows the start and end date of each one of the weeks by number, as well as the duration in number of days. For the elapsed weeks, that is, the weeks that have passed by already based on your start and report date, they will be shown in black. The dates that are beyond the current or report date will be grayed out. Also notice that for the last active week, the number of days will match the report date. Now, the second section is unique to every dashboard. Generally speaking, everything that is on the right of that date section that we just covered constitutes the metrics dashboard. And while it may have some common elements, they each show specific metrics and graphs. In many cases, such as this habits dashboard, you have 5 blocks displaying one metric each, with specific metrics and graphs, and with an overall and weekly value. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's now take a step back and talk about the Wellbeing Dashboard. There are 3 dashboards in the Wellbeing worksheet. First, energy, then mood, and then stress levels. And they all have the same structure. So once we have talked about energy, since it's the first one, you'll see how the others work as well. There are 3 subsections in this dashboard. First, you have the overall summaries on the top rows, from here all the way to here. First thing is you will find a table showing the total days by region, that is what you define as good, neutral, and bad, based on your threshold values. The table shows totals and percentages for each region and also displays the threshold values for your reference here. Naturally, green represents good, yellow neutral, and red bad. And as you can see, icons differ from energy to mood and to stress, which we saw earlier. Next, to the right of that table, you have a weekly time series view of the distribution of your values. This is displaying the average values from your journal for each one of the elapsed weeks. So you can see that it goes from week 1 all the way to week 36, which is the last active week I have. Lastly, you have an overall distribution of the days by region, that is good in green, the neutral in yellow, and the bad in red. The graph also displays your overall average in its center, as well as an overall status on top. Now, obviously, the status will vary based on your definitions, but this overall is simply the average across all the weeks that have been elapsed. Next up, you have a monthly view. Notice that this monthly view also plays a role in the first dashboard section, the one on the left panel, similar to the weeks, but this one has a monthly breakdown. Like the overall summary, you have the total number of days and corresponding percentages by zone, aggregated for each month-year combination. These month-year combinations will show up based on the dates that you define for your journal. To the right of this monthly year view, you have a calendar view, with each cell corresponding to a date. from the first date to the 31st of each month. These cells will have a color background reflecting the region in which the energy level fell based on the value you assigned for each day of your journal. For example, in this day, January 1st, I assigned a value that was 8 or above, and so it is colored in green. The same logic can be applied for what's neutral as well as for what's bad in red. Notice that the days that are out of scope, either because of the report date has not yet covered those days, for example, September 7 onwards, as well as these months that are not yet covered, or because a month doesn't have a particular set of days. So February goes all the way to the 29th in 2024 because it's a leap year. But notice that, for example, April doesn't have a 31st. These days that are considered out of scope will appear with a gray background. Then under the overall graph, you have a monthly average view. And for this, you have a graph as well as a number showing the average for each of the month-year combinations of your journal. Obviously, these numbers only consider the elapsed days, so in this case, this 6.3 is only the average of the first 6 days of September. Finally, the third subsection, you noticed, you have a weekly breakdown. Here. This is the same view as the previous monthly view, but this time you'll see a weekly breakdown instead of a monthly breakdown. You also have a total of the number of days and percentages for each region. And you also see the same color-coded cells, but now this time each one represents a day of the week. So you have 7 columns, one for each day of each of the weeks in the rows. Notice that obviously the values are the same for these weekly as well as monthly view. I have, for example, week 1, first day, green, followed by yellow all the way to the 7th day, where I have a green again. If I go back to my monthly view, you can see that I have a green, followed by all yellows, and then I have a green again. And if you're curious, this one becomes red and then yellow, red and then yellow, and so on. Similar to the monthly view, you also have now an average by week, where you have a graph as well as a numeric number indicating what value comes out of the average of each of these weeks. Now, if we scroll to the right and look at the mood dashboard, we will find the exact same layout. The only difference now is that the icons, so these 3 as well as the overall, are different, and also the label is now mood instead of energy, but you can expect the same functionality. The third and last dashboard, so stress, is exactly the same except for one small caveat. Since stress levels have the inverse logic, given that the lower the better, you will see that the threshold values are in reverse order. So threshold 1 appears first, and then threshold 2, as well as the arrow on the top left corner, which serves as a visual reminder that lower levels are preferred for this metric. Next up, let's talk about the wellness dashboard. First off, this is the only dashboard that differs completely in its structure against the rest of the dashboards in the entire series. This dashboard also has 2 logical sections, but the first one is now running across the top rows. You also have a report, start, and end date with the exact same considerations that we just saw. But now you have an overview block, which for now it only has a legend to interpret color coding. Then you have a monthly summary table, which is basically the same as the weekly one or even the monthly one we saw for well-being, but now it's running across the columns instead of the rows. And finally, you have a weekly daily view block here at the end. We will come back to this one in a bit. Notice now that the second section of the dashboard, the metrics section, is implemented in the rows, so it goes horizontally rather than vertically. And also see that each one of the 5 metrics, water intake, exercise, meditation, sleep, and healthy meals, follows the same structure. So let's use water intake to illustrate how this dashboard works, and the same logic will be applied to the other rows and metrics. First element is the overall summary, showing the daily average compared against the goal as a percentage. So you can see that you have a donut graph with the green as the complete and the gray as the incomplete, and then you have the percentage in the center. Next up, you have a couple of summary tables. The first one simply displays your goal, your daily average, as well as the daily average gap against your goal, both in graph and numeric fashion. In this first case, my daily goal was 2.0, as in 2.0 liters. My daily average is 2.0, so my gap is 0. So I have reached 100% of my goal, and I missed, or the gap is 0%. The second example, my goal was 45 minutes for exercise, but then my daily average was 37.1, and thus my gap is 7.9. So I have an 83% achievement, and my gap is 17%. For the second table, this displays the total days in the period up to your report date. So in this case, my period consists of 250 days from January 1st all the way till September 6th. And then it shows me the number of days that I completed or that I met my required water intake in this case, or any other metric for that matter, followed by the number of days where I didn't reach my goal, or my missed days. In this case, I only reached my goal in 171 days, that is 68%, and I missed it on 32% of the days. Notice that it is the combination of the two tables that really shows how close I am tracking my metric. If I only look at the first table, it would seem as if I have been successful because my overall average is 2 or 100%. But then I can see that I'm not really that consistent because I only completed that goal or reached 2.0 liters of water intake 68% of the days. The third section of the dashboard, as I mentioned, is a monthly breakdown of this first table of achievement. And it displays my daily average and completion percentage, as well as assigning a status color for each one of the months. This status color coding legend is here, and it shows that green represents that my metric has reached or exceeded the goal defined. Yellow means that my metric has fell short of the goal. Red is that my metric was not completed at all, so no input is provided throughout the entire length of a given month. And then for gray, it simply means that the report date doesn't yet cover that month. So October all the way till the end. Now, in addition to my numeric value, I also have a graph showing my daily average. In this case, the highlighted month, April, for water intake represents my highest daily average. And as you can see, I reached 100% or more of my goal on average for April, May, June, and July. The fourth and last subsection of this wellness dashboard displays a time series graph for each of the metrics. You can use the show by in this third option at the top to switch between daily and weekly average values. And each of the graphs has a green line showing where my goal is located. In this case, 2 liters of water for every single week. What happens if I switch to day view? So now you see that each one of these data points represents a day, and I have the exact date below. But if I want to look at something perhaps more meaningful, I can always switch to week, and it will show an average of those daily values. Lastly, you also have a couple of additional parameters called from date and to date. These will allow you to zoom in or zoom out so you can focus on specific periods of time. By default, from date is always equal to the start date of your journal, and to date is equal to the report date, but you can change those values. The only thing you need to consider is that from date should always be greater than or equal to the start date and less than or equal to the end date, and to date must be greater than or equal to from date as well as less than or equal to the end date. Let's do an example. Let's say I just want to focus for the first 3 months of the year. So let's say that I want March 31st of 2024. And now you can see that I have the first 13 weeks, and I want to see daily values. So this allows me to zoom in for the first quarter of the year, and then I can also look at even daily values. Or let's say I want to just focus on March, so I can say March 1st, 24. And now these values go from March 1st all the way to March 31st. As you can tell by now, the from, to, as well as show by values apply to every single graph. And as we just saw, every single one of the 5 metrics has the exact same structure. Now that's cool. Finally, for this video, let's talk about the Habits Dashboard. As we saw earlier, there are 2 logical sections in this worksheet. You have your dates section on the left, so your report start, end, and weekly breakdown, and you have a metrics section on the right. This particular dashboard implements 5 blocks, each one to show one particular habit. This means that you can visualize up to 5 habits at once. The only thing you need to do is to select any of your defined habits from the dropdown that appears on each one of the blocks. Once you do that, the block will be updated automatically. Now, if this is the empty view, showing no information, and I select journaling, it's now displaying the summaries and metrics for journaling based on the tracked values that I have defined in my journal. Now let's take a closer look at the habit block to see the functionalities implemented. And I'll just do the example on journaling, and the same will be applicable to the rest. There are 15 automated fields in each block. First, you have the name of the habit at the top, corresponding to the habit you have selected in the dropdown. If no habit is chosen, as I did before, the label no habit selected will appear and everything will be empty. Next up, you have what I call the definition metrics here. The weekly goal shows the weekly target completion in number of days per week. So I define that I wanted to journal 5 days per week. And the period goal shows the period target completion based on the number of days per week that I specified and the elapsed weeks with respect to the start and report dates. So, for example, my start date is January 1st and my report date September 6th. If I go to my weekly breakdown table, I see that I'm right now on week 36. And thus, if I multiply 5 by 36, I get a total of 180 days that need to be completed in 36 weeks. Next, there is an overall performance set of metrics, showing the results you have achieved in an aggregate way. Here. First one, days completed, is the total number of days a habit was marked as completed, so a checkmark was used in your journal. Then the missing days is the number of completion days that is missing to achieve the period target. In this case, 180 minus 168 gives me 12. 0 will be shown if the goal is achieved or surpassed. Weeks completed is the number of weeks where the completion goal was met or surpassed. So this means that only in 22 weeks did I complete my weekly goal. The average completion is the total number of days completed divided by the elapsed weeks. So 168 divided by 36 gives me 4.7. Then overall completion represents the total number of days a habit was completed against the period target in percentage format. So 168 divided by 180 gives me 93. The same goes for the missing percentage, which shows the days missing against the period target in percentage format. Now you have an overall graph here as well. The graph will display the overall completion and status in a visual manner. So obviously the green portion represents what you have completed, and the grayish portion is what you're missing. And you have a trophy which changes color to show when the goal has been reached or surpassed. In this case, if I scroll to the right, you will see that it turns green when my completion is 100% or more. Finally, your longest streak. This is the longest number of consecutive days that a habit was marked as completed. The last 4 fields are displayed in the weekly section of the dashboard, in this table. First, you have the week number, which is displayed for easier reading. And then you have a weekly status, which applies the following logic. It's green whenever you have reached or exceeded that habit's week goal. It will be yellow if the habit completion shows progress but doesn't meet the goal. It will be red whenever the habit wasn't completed not even once during the entire week. And then finally, it's going to be gray if the report date specified doesn't cover the corresponding week. As you can see, for weeks 37 onwards, the status is gray. Then for the last 2 fields, you have a weekly achievement in a graphical and numeric way. The graph has a relative size based on the values for the rest of the weeks. Whenever a week has no habit completion, for example here, you can see that no value is displayed. It has a 0 here, and then the corresponding red status is shown. Finally, the numeric value, as I mentioned, is just the total number of days the habit was completed in a given week. And it also shows the percentage number based on the number of days that you were targeting. In this case, 4 out of 5 is 80%. Now, to close this section, let's go through a few additional notes that are applicable to all the 3 dashboards. As I mentioned, the start date and end date, which appear on each one of those 3, are pulled directly from your journal. Do not manually modify them in your dashboard. Report date, which is the same as your highlight date in your journal, or in case it's empty, it will display today's date, is also a field that you should not change because it is directly related to how the dashboard works, and it may cause errors if you do so. Finally, in case you have data in your journal filled out for your dates that are beyond your report date, so everything in this case for weeks 37 onwards, know that your dashboard will not use or show that information. It will be simply grayed out in the weekly or monthly view, and none of the overall summary metrics on the top will integrate those data points. This concludes the demonstration of the habits, wellness, and well-being dashboards. See you in the next video to continue our tour